talking with Heidi Jaros, and we are going to talk about AI adoption, readiness, and risk assessment. Heidi has become a bit of an expert in this field. So, actually, let's start with you had a background in HR and operations consulting or something along those lines. How did you go from that into making companies AI ready?
Yeah, my background really started in adult education. I taught English as a second language for a long time, and morphed into a career in organizational development, effectiveness, HR as well, just general HR, business partnership, and strategic partnership. A lot of that work is around change management, engagement, getting employees bought in to new things, right? So it is a more natural fit than you might think. I think a lot of times when we think about AI, we think about it in very technical terms. We think about what kind of tools are being chosen. We think about, highly specialized AI, technical teams who are building LLMs and, machine learning and all of that, but also choosing the right tools for organizations. All of that's critically important, obviously. But where I am seeing and where I kind of felt the fit was where I could add a lot of value was in the people side of that. So you sort of have a technical side of adoption, which is making sure you're really choosing the right tools and you're presenting that to people in a way that says, here's what the capabilities are. But then you have the messier side, and that's the people and culture side. And that is where I've spent the majority of my career is sitting in mess and trying to create structure around that difficulty, right? To help people feel engaged and embedded in whatever we're trying to drive in a particular organization, whether that's a change, whether that's their daily work, that sort of thing. So that's where I was seeing a big hole in AI adoption. And I think you're starting to see a lot of the research bear that out now too, as we're a few years into this, and you're starting to see a lot of companies say, what's going on? We've made all of these investments. Why aren't people using it? We're having a lot of trouble measuring ROI and getting our bang for our buck with all these huge investments we've made. And so that's how I got into it, was really saying, I have something to leverage here from a change management, adult education, and organizational development perspective.
So, how do you take that information that and your knowledge of the human side of things and apply that when you're assessing a company and their AI readiness, since you're not coming at it from a purely technical standpoint?
Yeah, I think one of the first things I look for is alignment, so stakeholder alignment. You'll walk into a company and you'll see everybody, all of the main stakeholders, whether that's employees, line managers, senior leadership, C-suite, they're all coming at it from a different value proposition, right? So your C-suite is, I'm making the investment, I want to see the ROI, I want to see it tomorrow. Of course, that makes everybody scramble and that puts everybody in a bit of a panic, which we don't do well as humans with either, right? That kind of panicky feel of, oh my God, my boss wants this done tomorrow and I don't even know where to begin, right? But then you've got other stakeholders involved here, which are going to be your legal team. What's the governance look like? So that's the angle they're going to be seeing is, oh my God, how much risk are we assuming when we're using these tools? You're going to have employees looking at this from a place of maybe a mix of excitement and fear and intimidation, where even if they're excited about it, they may not very well know where to start. There are 3 billion online webinars they can take. I can tell you, I've probably taken them all at this point, all 3 billion. And I can tell you from my perspective is you just kind of get nuggets, but until you're really using that AI in your daily work and you're making that connection with how does this help me change my habits in the day to day, you're not going to get there and you're going to remain feeling behind and feeling intimidated and feeling like maybe your job is at risk, right? So that's where your employee stakeholders are coming from. Like, how is this going to affect me? And maybe a little bit of fear. And your line managers are coming from a place of, I don't really know what's expected of me. I'm getting this pressure from above to drive ROI with these tools. I'm getting this pressure from below of confusion and fear that I have to manage. So they're in a difficult spot and often without a skill set to manage all of that human emotion and, pressure. So, one of the first things that I want to do in an assessment is do interviews with those key stakeholder groups or representatives from those key stakeholder groups. Get a perspective, and actually, we'll talk later about a tool that helps me get each individual's perspective before then we can walk into a meeting and say, here's what's coming out in terms of, challenges that people are seeing with adoption when they took an assessment that went through several critical factors for adoption. Here's where we're landing. And now let's talk about that as a stakeholder group and get everybody aligned. So that's where I'm going to come at it from. A first step is gaining alignment with key stakeholders. And then we're going to come at it with trying to put structure around chaos. What specific steps need to be taken to get us from point A to point B? Point A being we have the tools, maybe we've probably even done a little bit of training on tools capabilities, but we are not, an organization where this is embedded in our daily work and in our culture, and we are not seeing, maybe don't even know how yet to measure the return on investment for it.
And are these next steps your 4 Ps that you've put together?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I try to, again, trying to always create some structure and chaos to help. I feel like it really is calming to people when they can have a chaotic situation broken down into pieces. I've learned that in my adult education background, in my change management background. You get bite-sized pieces, and it's easier for people to digest than trying to eat the whole hoagie all at once, right? So the 4 Ps that are developed based on adult education principles and change management best practices. And they start with picking the right tools. So a lot of this is going to be with your tech and senior leadership team, but I also encourage teams who have not picked and invested in their AI tools yet to make sure that they're gathering feedback from the line manager and the employee level on what kind of problems they have that AI could help with so that you're really choosing the right tools for your organization, not necessarily the tools with the biggest buzz. If you go for the tools with the biggest buzz at the moment, that would have been ChatGPT 2 years ago, and you would be missing out on Claude, right? So you really have to choose the right tools for your organization. And then there's the present phase, which is the second P. And that is when you're just kind of giving people the rundown of here's what we've chosen, here's the capabilities, here's how we see this is going to help us on a high level, strategic level as an organization. This is where I think a lot of companies are stopping. They are considering that present phase as full enablement. And so they're sort of going, here's some training. Now go forward and produce results for us. And they're going, well, why aren't they producing the results we asked them to produce? Well, because they're getting that background kind of like you would in one of those 3 million webinars, but you're not getting that real connection to your daily work and you're not getting the space to practice, which brings us to that third P practice, right? So this is the
yeah.
space. There is a bridge I consider in this model between if I've got to put it on one screen, so it's 4 boxes, right? When I have it in my graphic. But in my head, you've got 2 boxes on a side of an enormous, divide and 2 boxes on the other side. So you've got pick and present, and then you've got the culture side, which is practice and produce. So practice is the place where the real investment for companies happen in enablement. Going at the team level, helping teams identify use cases that make sense in their daily work, helping each team make a plan for how they're going to hold each other accountable, how they're going to practice, how they're going to share learning. And then, of course, there's an overarching enterprise component to that as well that says you're going to want your incentive structure and your company-wide programs to support what the teams are doing on the individual team level. And then that brings you to, once you get people, that's the space, right? That's the space where you can really get people bought in of, oh, I can see what this tool can do for me now. I'm learning how to embed it in my daily work. I'm being given the space and time to do that without a huge amount of pressure. And then you can start translating that into, okay, now let's get our metrics a little tighter. Our metrics in practice might start as, how much usage do we have? And are people using and experimenting with the tools? When you move to that last P, which is produce, that's your long-term phase. That's where you're setting up your culture and your measurements to drive real, like, how is this affecting revenue? How is this affecting, lowering time on processes that we have in place or improving processes, customer satisfaction. So that's when you get those real sort of ROI oriented metrics solid in place and running for the long term. So those are the 4 Ps of pick, present, practice, and produce.
Okay, great. And we'll put the graphic up on the screen. So
Great.
we'll have that available. Uh, so when you've got a company, an image of a company at the beginning versus one that has actually put everything into production and is making things work. Where do you see what does that company at the other end look like that's actually got everything implemented and is making things work?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of critical elements to that company at the other side that's getting everything to work. Because when the company at the beginning is a little bit of that chaos that I talked about,
Right.
everybody has different expectations. They haven't aligned with each other, and they haven't done real enablement at the line manager and employee level. The company that comes through that practice phase over to the produce phase has gotten that has gotten AI embedded in their daily work by giving people time and space. I know that's really hard for senior leaders to hear, but kind of this concept of sometimes you have to slow down a beat in order to speed up, I think really applies here. If you can slow down for that beat in the practice phase, make people feel really psychologically safe, give them proper space within their workday. Don't just add this on as another thing they have to do. Remove some of their priorities. Give them space to actually start using this and building habits around it. You can then take off after that phase into produce and really see results and see that embedded culture of AI is not just a tool anymore. AI is how we do things.
So I imagine that there's a whole lot of growing pains and an assessment that has to happen between that beginning and that fully productive stages. So that's where the tool is that you created, right?
Right. I wouldn't say it's going to be a tool. It's called the AI Readiness and Risk Assessment, GPT. It's meant to be a starting point. So, it is not meant for you to go plug in a few answers to a few questions and it's going to spit out a full roadmap with timelines and just do all of that for you because it is meant to help you start with alignment. So the first thing that I use the tool for is to have all the stakeholders complete the assessment, submit it to me as a facilitator so that I can then do an analysis on where we're aligned as stakeholders and where we are not aligned. What do we need to discuss and get aligned on specific critical actions that are related to adoption. Now, the first thing that the tool will spit out is like this really extensive 42 critical actions. That sounds like a lot, right? And are you
Yeah.
red, yellow, or green on each of those actions? And it is a lot, but it helps you get a granular view of every little step and piece that goes into making humans do something that is hard for humans to do, which is change, right? Once you have that, the tool will actually then help you prioritize as well and say, okay, what are the first things that we should prioritize? But what I use it for is to kind of get people like which critical actions, like you're going to have some people say, we're green on training. We've done enablement. And then you're going to have more your line managers and your employees saying, no, we have not. We are red on that, right? And so
Right.
that first step of using that tool as a means of getting everybody's input in a structured way so that we can all align. From there, you build a plan specific to your company. One of the other key points where we get involved, right? I'm not going to pretend like I can help you come in and pick the right tools for your organization. I can certainly help you make sure that you are incorporating feedback from the right stakeholders when you're making those decisions. But where I think our bread and butter at EnableWork Consulting is these team AI activation sessions, where we're not going to just go in and say, here's the tool and here's how you do some prompting and good luck with this now. We'll do a little bit of that at the start, but where we spend the bulk of our time is getting teams to identify how they can use this to better their lives, to better their own engagement at work, to better their customers' experiences, their own work experience. There's a huge ability for AI to really help employees feel like they love their jobs again because they don't have to do so much of the work maybe that they don't love, that AI can start picking up for us. And then critically, we close those sessions with making a team accountability plan. So when we walk out of this session, because this is just one session for an hour, 4 hours, or whatever it's going to be, when we walk
Right.
out of this session, how are we going to really make sure the rubber meets the road? We're holding each other accountable, and we have a plan in place to do that. So kind of that team contracting piece. So those are kind of the critical places where I like to parachute in and feel like I can add the most value. And then also in helping companies then say, okay, how are we going to identify how we're measuring for success here?
So what would you say to one of the leaders that of a company that might be watching this? What it should be their next step?
I mean, I think the next step is, I mean, check the tool out, get a feel for where you think, where you are in terms of all of these actions, these critical actions. Maybe some of them you haven't even considered. But I would say like, if you don't have time for anything else, if you're like, I have one thing that I can do, and that's all I can do for AI adoption. Okay, two things. Get a plan in place to get your line leaders engaged. If they feel competent and confident with the tools, if they're using them themselves, if they're role modeling for their teams, like, hey, I tried this thing and it burned, like it crashed and burned. It did not work the way I thought it would. Hey, team, maybe you can help me figure out how to make it work, or maybe we ditch this as a use case for now because it's not working, right?
Mhm.
If they can show that vulnerability with their teams, that sets the tone for people to be open to getting engaged and for taking risks. So get those line leaders bought in. And then the second thing I would say is get that enablement for employees at the team level in place so that each team has its own plan and its own means of holding each other accountable for building AI into their daily work and their habits.
Okay, great. Well, this has been a great introduction into the tool that you were talking about, and there should be links on the screen, and we'll also try to pin them in the comments for anybody that wants to access the tool or get in touch with you at Enable Work for
Yes.
additional consulting. Um, is there anything that I didn't touch on that you think we need to?
No, not at all. This is fine. I love talking about these things. And like you said, if there's anybody out there, I do a free 30-minute consultation, and I am highly energized by this work. So happy to have a brainstorm with anybody who's struggling with this. And, if that leads to an engagement, lovely. If it doesn't, it usually leads to a really great conversation. So either
Great,
way, give me a call.
great. Thanks, Heidi. It was great to see you, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon about whatever's coming up in the AI world.
Yeah, I hope so. Thanks so
All right,
much.
great.
Bye.
Thanks.